take 4 and Vladimir Putin and the 30 municipals asking for his resignation by signing a petition. Those municipals demanding he step down over his handling of the Ukraine campaign. That's reported in the Moscow Times, where I got the information, and from the Hill, where I also got the information, and double check my source if that was true or not true. The next thing I want to talk about is how important it is to preserve our American way of the Constitution and the way we conduct the way our way of life is, and to preserve the system. It's not the two-party system that makes it work. It's the Constitution. And what that means is, in the case of Vladimir and the Ukraine campaign, our forefathers predicted that kind of scenario within our own country and what the way we can get out of that crisis would be, and that would be through the Constitution. Now, what I'm trying to say is we're a journalism mentality system of government. Although the media has a lot of control over the information, social media and people themselves have the ability to report, and the freedom of reporting has never been more important than right now in 2020. What I'm trying to say is this: it's taking this much time for those municipals to ask Russia, the Vladimir Putin, to resign after barely 12 months. Now they're signing that petition. Now, if that scenario were to happen in the United States and a president had the same situation and the tyranny was going on, that there was losses in a war that they didn't believe in, you have to understand our Constitution would allow us to vote him out, number one. Number two, in their case, they have a 25-year, he's the president. It's taken the information for the losses in the Ukraine campaign. I'm going to have to put this on YouTube to finally get them to get off their rears and sign that petition for him to resign. So the information's taken at least 3 to 4 weeks, and then a couple of weeks for them to decide. That's 5 or 6 weeks. It's not quickly, especially the more you get into Russia. Those municipals are not getting the information the way an international information should be, because it's controlled by the Federation. That's so important, because although they are asking Vlad to resign, I want you to put yourself outside the box just for 1 minute and think about what I'm trying to say. There's 2 things that are happening in the Russia campaign. One, they're losing in Ukraine and they're getting desperate, and we know this. 2, how does it affect the United States? Although that should always be number 1, of course. Now, in my opinion, this could be a smoke screen itself. The fact that those municipals initially supported Vlad to go into Ukraine, or did not make a fuss about it, and use propaganda for their people to agree with it. All of them did, partook in it. Sort of like the Iraq War, but without people disagreeing with the fact that it did not have anything to do with 9/11, and that's what we thought why we were going to war at the time. It's so important because they're so similar. What's happening, tyranny, but what's happening, our way of life is protecting us from it getting any worse. Number 1, they don't have the same journalism ability to speak out against something as we do. And number 2, if it's taking them 5 weeks to finally make a decision, if that was to happen here in the United States, that could happen. And you have to understand, if the news media is giving you a certain information, and I have a certain information, but I can't get it to you, there are people out there that have better sources than what we're getting provided. It's very similar. So you have to understand one and two things are happening here. One, they're not intending to stop the Ukraine campaign regardless of the petition. Two, the only way they're going to remove Vlad is if he steps down. If he doesn't step down, another person will go and take over. Will he or will he not continue the Ukraine campaign? That's what should happen. He stepped down, someone else come in, resign. But if that does not happen, that means if we're at a certain, I guess they would call that DEFCON 4, you're going to have to move it up to number 3 or number 2. Why? Because they're being dishonest about this entire quagmire and they're getting desperate. Not just the leader, but the person who installed the leader. They're not going to back down. If they retreat and agree to a certain truce and stop the aggression, then that's the number one option and way out for them. But if you see tomorrow or the following day more and more attacks on these heavy equipment and planes in areas that are not in military zones, then you'll understand that they don't have the intention of stopping the conflict. I still can't understand what the conflict's all about, Russia and Ukraine, because if Vlad wanted to reestablish the USSR, why would he want to do that if Ukraine was the number one or a fourth of the USSR's power and had way more influence than the Russian Federation during a certain stretch of history? And they know that. So I don't buy that argument that he wants to reestablish the USSR. If they do, then Ukraine right now has the upper hand because Ukraine is on a momentum swing after getting what occurred to them. Their natural reaction is what is about to take place. And the Russians are going to have to make a choice. Do they want to face that, or do they want to agree on some form of truce, humility, and then for both their cultures to figure out a way to do business together again someday in a trust format? The two of them working together is a lot stronger of a unity than them in this kind of conflict. So that's why I can't understand why Vlad has decided to go from Syria into Ukraine when they have all that territory anyway. They're already in Donetsk. They already have 12% of the country. It's just ridiculous, the fact that this war continues and there's no UN or no US forcing them to not continue the conflict. But the way they've played it or allowed it to transpire, the Ukrainians on the ground taking the grunt and now going on the counteroffensive, Russia's going to be sorry, in my opinion, for instigating this war versus their people. And it's just gotten to a point where everything we see from Vlad and Russia is desperation. It's not even any war strategy of any kind for any purpose, for any reason. It's just pathetic and ridiculous and atrocious how low your people have gotten. The fact you've allowed this to happen. I don't know if you guys in Russia ever saw the movie Rocky IV, and after Drago took down Apollo, they had a news conference when Rocky was going to go and fight in the Soviet Union versus Drago. And the manager of Ivan Drago got mad and said, how pathetic and weak your society has become, that's now on your side, in my opinion. And those words could never have been better scripted for a movie during that time in 1987, I believe, to pertain more in 2022 for the Russian people. How pathetic the fact that you guys have continued to allow this onslaught against innocent civilians, not only in Ukraine, but also in Syria, and then not demanding Vlad to resign or have elections of states for him to not have that kind of military power. I'm just not sure what kind of system of government you truly are, because it looks to me as some form of, that's a good word for it, a giant fort of a person that thinks he's above the law, committing war crimes. What should happen is the Ukrainians should straight up apprehend Vlad, take him to The Hague, try him for war crimes, and then have some form of punishment for what's occurred. That's what should happen. Now in Russia, they're going to have a choice. Do they or do they not want him to resign? Now, if he does not resign, then this is all a smokescreen, and the United States needs to worry more about this conflict than they are, and take this a little more seriously. The fact that now they're starting to point their weapons at us. Their conventional weapons against civilians, you see the damage that it's doing. And they're not able to, on the ground, make the moves that they need to make in order to fulfill their objective. So they get desperate by going against non-military targets. And that's the number one act of war versus war, an act against humanity, and it's a war crime straight up. And I believe that we need, as the United States, if we're at DEFCON 4 or 5, we need to go to 3 and 2, because now they're looking at us. Why are they looking at us? Because Joe Biden's weak, but at the same time, a lot of money has gone into that campaign. Not that much, but enough for them to get trained and on their own push those guys back. And now they're bitter about it. So we got to look at it like, are they going to not look at us for helping them? Or are we going to help them more? We should have helped them more initially, so we never got to this point, because Joe Biden's fear was they were going to be pointing their big weapons at us if we do get involved. But at the same time, us not getting involved or indirectly just getting money down there or weapons, systems, that's enough for them to be doing the same kind of pointing at us. And that's so important that we do not talk about that in the news. That's why it's so important for this conflict to end. It needs to end, and it needs to end within 30 days. Because in my opinion, the longer it continues, the more chance Vlad is going to be indirectly attacking or directly attacking the United States of America. Thank you.